Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Commander's Brew here on YouTube. We are here making decks every week, having a laugh. Got my guy Karth here in the corner for some reason still. We this week are brewing around treasures, but it's a Golgari build using Mazirek Kraul Death Priest. So a bit of a different flavor on treasures, especially something that we're seeing a lot these days. So check it out. Here it comes. All right, here we go. This is a very interesting deck. This one is not based around a new commander from one of the more recent sets, but instead it is based around a theme that we're seeing become an evergreen mechanic in Magic, and that is treasures. Been a big impact on Magic, I would say, in the way that a lot of the colors interact with these like things that were kind of introduced in a weird way. They were introduced as like gold first, kind of back in like the Theros block, right? And then we had that went away, and then they brought treasures back in Ixalan with the pirates and everything. And since then, I think they just were like, this is a big hit. We fixed the way gold works, because now you have to tap it and everything. And now it's just an evergreen mechanic, basically, that we see. It's not technically evergreen, but we just see it so often. It's printed all through Commander products. We've seen it in the D&D stuff. We've seen it in like other tangentially pirate-related cards, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So wherever treasure makes sense, which is a lot of places in a fantasy setting, right? So luckily we're seeing a lot of treasures, and it's good because it is a great mechanic. We love treasures. They smooth out your mana. They fix your mana. It's not an overwhelmingly powerful mechanic, but it's something that we can build around and like, use to our advantage in a lot of different ways. And that's what we're doing here. And we are taking a somewhat unique take on it, as you would expect from us here at the Commander's Brew. I've decided I wanted to build a Golgari treasures deck. So not using red, which is a bold move, because red is, I would argue, the number one treasure color.
Maybe blue number 2.
Blue could be number 2. One of the more iconic currently treasure cards is actually a white card, right? Or there's 2 really good white cards now, I think. So we're really, we're really doing something here by taking probably the 2 lesser used treasure colors in black and green. But luckily there's enough stuff here to sustain us. There's enough stuff to make this deck kind of work and do its thing. So let's get into it. So first of all, we'll talk about the commander. And it's weird. We just haven't had a deck that's not been based around the commander for a long time. So it's kind of fun to be talking about it in this way. But first up is our commander, and that is Mazirek Kraul Death Priest. I'll get to it, but there was I had a little bit of a crisis. This is what I had in mind at first, but then there was another commander idea that kind of popped up. But check out Lost Cards for that, because we'll go deep on that in the Lost Cards, which is coming out 2 days after this if you're watching it when it comes out. Otherwise, check it out. It's on YouTube. Okay. Mazirek Kraul Death Priest, 3 black green legendary insect shaman, a 2/2 with flying. Whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this is obviously going to work really well with treasures, whether we have them or our opponents have them. And it's just pure bonus. We don't have like, we have some stuff that works with Mazirek really well, but we didn't like make Mazirek our main, like, we're not building around Mazirek. We're building around treasures. Mazirek is a great commander if that's what we're doing because of his ability. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So I actually, when I thought about this, you know what? We'll get to it. We'll get to it when we talk about cards, because I don't want to reveal too much too early.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, let's set the scene here. Let's talk about how we're going to get treasures in green black. It's actually a little harder than you would think, but it's not impossible. Take a look at these first 3, Sean. Why don't you read these for everyone? And let's just get us going here with some of these things that make treasures and deal with treasures.
Grim Hireling, Tiefling Rogue. That's 3 and a black for a 3/2. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create 2 treasure tokens. I don't know if I've read this card before. This feels new to me. 2 treasure tokens whenever a creature hits. That's pretty good.
That's not bad, right? It's one or more.
One or more. So okay.
You get 2. Yeah. But that's still pretty good.
Still pretty good. Black. Sacrifice X treasures. Target creature gets -X/-X until in turn. Activate only as a sorcery. All right.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Ruthless Knave, a classic from Ixalan. 2 and a black, Orc Pirate, 3/2. And you can pay 2 and a black, sacrifice a creature, create 2 treasures, sacrifice 3 treasures, draw a card. I like that.
Yeah. Another way to make 2 treasures, which is nice. This one you have to sacrifice a creature for, but luckily, I mean, you might be able to tell simply because we're running Mazirek that sacrificing is going to be a good thing in this deck. So we're happy to see Ruthless Knave pop up here.
Yeah, and then Revel in Riches. Love this card. 4 and a black for an enchantment. It's underrated. Well, I guess it's not underrated because now it's over $10. Yeah, holy cow.
Exactly.
It doesn't surprise me. Revel in Riches. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you make a treasure. And at the beginning of upkeep, if you have 10 treasures or more, you win the game. This makes you board wipe proof, right? Yeah. Like your opponents can't wipe the board. Otherwise, they'll be like, well, I'll give you the 10 treasures you need. And now that it's so much easier to just make treasures. Wow. I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me this card's expensive now.
Yeah, it's too bad for a number of reasons. It's too bad that it's kind of that expensive. We're going to talk about that in the budget report a little bit. But it is one of the key ways to make treasures in this deck is to have things die and for us to get a few treasures here and there.
Yeah.
I was talking about this card with some folks on our Discord, and we were just saying how it's just it's such a bummer in a weird way that this has the alternate win con on it, because there's so many decks where I just want this to make treasures. You know, I just want I don't want people to be afraid of this card. I just want them to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's annoying. You're making some extra mana over there, but like that's not killing me. Whereas like this is an active like end the game scenario for this deck, and it's like I guess if I win that's good, but I don't want them to destroy this before I even come close to that, right? So
the astute opponents will realize that this is the part of the engine that is making you win, even without that text.
But what I want to but it's not, it might not be as pressing, you know, when I have a bunch of mana already. People might just be like, okay, well, and it's hard to have an engine when it's your opponents that creatures that die, by the way, because they have a hand in it a little bit. So but what I was going to say is I just really want Wizards to print something with this ability on it without the win the game thing. It could be a creature, you know, it could be something like that, you know what I mean? I'd be very happy if that were to be printed.
Cursed artifact that turns your opponent's creatures into treasures.
Yeah. But anyways, Revel in Riches is still quite good. It's still, you know, a 5 mana enchantment that you know, that can come down and do that. So you know, be wary of when you play it, where you play it, and maybe
how and why.
Of course. And then we have another card that's going to deal with treasures here. Skullport Merchant. This is one from the most recent set here. 2 and a black for a dwarf citizen, which is pretty funny. It's a 1/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token, and then you can pay 1 and a black to sacrifice another creature or treasure and draw a card. So this is just a base of what the deck's doing, right? We're making treasures and we can interact with them when we want. Mazirek, there's a lot of creatures in this deck. We didn't go the token route. I felt like we've been doing that lately a little bit, and like we had a red-black deck that sort of touched on treasures, but it was pretty different than this. So, you know, I didn't want to make it the same as that. I didn't want to make it the same as the token. So actually, we leaned away from tokens, but still, sacrifice is a theme. And messing around with treasures is a great theme, and you know, anything that does that is really good for this deck. So let's stop messing around here because we know what's coming next. Let's start talking about these neat moves.
Working on a neat moves. We're just gonna take a second to handle a little bit of business. And the main point is, thanks for watching. If you want to see more of our comedic takes and offbeat decks, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell to make sure you don't miss anything. And if you're loving our stuff and want to support further, the best way is to head over to patreon.com/commandersbrew. Find out how our generous patrons keep our show growing and how you can get in on the brewing action too through our Discord. Or, if you'd rather, just hang out and play some games with like-minded Commander players. Now, let's get back to those news.
All right, so let's get into this. So this is, I mentioned that there was a little bit of a crisis in the middle of building this deck that was purely created by the wonderful creative minds in our Discord, because they suggested there was basically like a light suggestion of something else we could do with two of the ingredients in this deck. And Sean, why don't you read these first two here, and you can all figure out why that is.
Oh, sure. I believe you put up the Icelandic version of this card.
Did I?
Instead of the English. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah.
Each Tekik Salvage Splicer.
Yeah.
This is 4 and a green for legendary human artificer. You know, my boy Each. Ik. So this is a 1/1 legendary creature for 5. When it enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. And whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, like a treasure maybe, put a +1/+1 counter on this and a +1/+1 counter on each golem you control. And it has partner. That doesn't matter.
Who might we partner this incredible card with?
Nadir, Agent of the Duskanel, 5 and a black, legendary elf warrior, 3/3. When a token you control leaves the battlefield, like a treasure, put a +1/+1 counter on Nadir, and when Nadir leaves the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power, also as partner.
So, I mean, you can see right here that this is also an excellent candidate, both of these, the partners of Tekik and Nadir, to helm this deck. We're talking about treasures, we're sacrificing things, we've got artifacts galore, you know, making tokens also works very well, even if Mazirek is just in our 99, let's say. So it was a really tough decision. Like we have a couple cards that actually work really well with Tekik because it's such a good card in here, but overall, I decided at the end when I was putting like there was a point where Tekik and Nadir were the commanders of this deck, and then I switched back to Mazirek. So I had to like mess with some cards, take some cards out, and like, you know. Anyways, again, lost cards. Check it out because we'll go deeper into this deck. But these cards are still both really good in this deck, even as 99 performers, right? Like Tekik is going to make us, even if it just comes down, does the thing at once, makes a golem, and just starts getting bigger. When he gets bigger and the golem gets bigger, that's going to happen. That's really good. Nadir, same thing. You know, tokens leave the battlefield. This guy gets big. Plus, then if you try to remove this card, because it leaves the battlefield, like they can exile this. They can swords Nadir with a bunch of counters on it. Doesn't matter. You still create the tokens either way. So that's a really excellent card to have. They both work so well, and they're both going to get big with +1/+1 counters. And there's a couple other ones that are going to do that too, like Ravenous Squirrel. Single Golgari hybrid mana for a 1/1 squirrel that says whenever you sacrifice an artifact or squirrel, put a +1/+1 counter on Ravenous Squirrel, and then it has the ability of 1 black green, sack an artifact or creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So just another great card to have with treasures. You just pay 3. Sack one of the mana can oh no, it can't. Never mind. That's gold. Oh no, I guess you can't do that either. Anyways, never mind. Whatever. So basically you can use 3 mana and sack a treasure, and then you can draw a card. Very, very worth it. You can sack Nadir at an opportune time to get a bunch of 1/1 elves if you like. Like that's kind of the only way to make a bunch of tokens of this deck. But that can still be really nice. There's some nice interactions with Ravenous Squirrel. I was actually really happy to be able to use this card because I just kind of had it in my head that all the squirrel cards work only with squirrels.
Right.
But that's not the case. This is a great card for a lot of Golgari decks. And then we have one final one. There's a bunch of cards like this, but yeah, Moulder Beast is another really good one. 4 and a green for a 5/3 with trample, and whenever an artifact's put into the graveyard for the battlefield, Moulder Beast gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is straight up a win con though. If you have a big turn where you have a ton of treasures and Moulder Beast just attacks, like, well, how much life you got? How many treasures do I have? Each one of these is 2 damage to you, right? And see
not to mention the squirrels getting bigger, itch Tekix getting bigger. Like you've sort of got secret.
Yeah.
And at any point you can just be like, I can just make them big whenever I want.
And they would all trigger off the same thing that's happening, right? It's like,
yes, you're not sacrificing an artifact to do this. This is just watching for artifacts going to the graveyard, like treasures.
So you can actually even still use the mana from the treasures that you're sacrificing to cast something else.
Yeah.
And that's what makes everything get huge. So really, so that's really, really fun. Check out, and we've got a lot of cards. Like I said, we built that red black deck that had a treasure theme in it. Obviously, we're going harder into treasures here, but this has some of those same black cards that we used there. Sean, read this one here. This one was a good one.
Sure. Disciple of the Vault. It's a single black mana for a human cleric. 1/1. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Great thing about this one is it triggers off of their treasures too. And these days, pretty much everyone has treasures, so that you're going to see that happen.
Good call.
Yeah. Read this next one too. This one's really good.
Feign the Broker. Looks a lot like Loki. 2 and a black. Legendary human warlock. 3/3. Lots of abilities. Looks like Trading Post down here.
It does.
Tap. Sacrifice a creature. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Cool. Tap. Remove a counter from a creature you control. Create a treasure token. Tap. Sacrifice an artifact. Create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying, and 3 and a black untap Feign the Broker. That's sort of like Trading Post. You can you can work him up the chain if you want. You can untap him even, so you can do all of these in a turn if you have a ton of mana.
Yeah.
Neat.
Very neat, right? This card, I saw it when it first came out, but now that I'm like applying it in a practical way, thinking about an actual deck that wants to use it, maybe it's just this deck, but like, wow, this works with everything we're doing.
This is why having commander precons for every set is, I think, a good idea, because this is a 3/3 for 3 with 4 abilities. They're like, you can't do that in a regular set where people draft it. Like, you can't. Otherwise, this would be a 6 mana 1/1.
That's true.
And it would be unplayable for everybody.
Yeah, it's true. Then it's no good. Exactly. Then no format wants it. It sucks.
Right.
Yeah, Feign the Broker is really good. Really, the sweet spot is there. I mean, this is a legendary creature. You know, I could easily see a mono black build of Feign the Broker that just is super fun because it just builds around all of these cool abilities. But yeah, here we're happy to do any of these things. Even the making like changing a an errant treasure token into a 2/1 flying Inkling creature token is not bad. Like that's actually that's a fine thing to do. At the point in the game when it makes sense. If you need a blocker that can fly, anything like that. So really good synergy there. Sean, you won't have this one on. I added this one after, but this is a really good card for this deck. It's called Animation Module. Single mana. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And then you can pay 3 and tap, choose a counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. So really what this does is this kind of, when Animation Module is out there, our deck is able to do something that it doesn't usually do, which is what I said is like, we don't lean into tokens. We didn't really make this a token build, but Animation Module makes it possible to get a couple tokens out there. And if you notice, Itch Tech Kick, Nadir, Ravenous Squirrel, they all deal with +1/+1 counters. Obviously, Mazirek is dealing with +1/+1 counters. So you can get a lot of triggers from Animation Module, which mean even more triggers the next time Mazirek triggers. Like if we make 2 servos for 2 mana, next time Mazirek puts counters on everything, that's going to be a bunch of possible more, paying 1 to make more servos and so on. So this is kind of its own little token engine, kind of like hidden in the deck, which I think is a really neat idea.
And this is this is great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it costs 1 to come down, and then you can sacrifice a treasure to put 1 mana in your mana pool. Mazirek will put a +1/+1 counter on every creature you have.
Yeah.
And if we want, we can do this on an end step, but we can also spend our entire land-based mana no need to sack extra treasures if we don't want to yet, but we can spend and just putting servos out at the cost of 1 per servo. That's the cheapest a token gets.
Yeah.
Well, that's cheaper. That's too cheap. Tokens should cost more than that by most accounts. The first one's sort of free too, because you've tapped and sacked the artifact and put that mana in your mana pool. So like that first one, it pays for itself.
You can kind of just turn treasures into servos with this in a way, right? Like,
oh yeah,
do it, you sack the treasure, you use that 1 mana to create the servo, so it becomes the servo that you get. So that's pretty fun.
Become the servo that you want to be.
Yes. Become make sacrifices to become the servo. We got another package here of cards that kind of turn the deck on its head a little bit and is one of the inspirations for the deck, oddly enough. It's kind of buried here and then it moves a little bit, but actually this is one of the first things I thought of when making this deck. So Sean, I'll let you read these 3 cards and tell me what you think of them.
We're talking about our boy Bucknard's Everfull Purse. 2 mana for an artifact, 1 tap, roll a d4, and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. The player to your right gains control of Bucknard's Everfull Purse.
Bucknard.
Okay. Tempting Contract, 4 generic for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent may create a treasure token. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent may create a treasure token. For each opponent who does, you create a treasure token. This is going to be excellent at a table where people refuse to pay 1 for what's it called, Ristic Study. if your opponents don't care and just will do it and don't care what you get, run this card. But if your opponents never pay for Ristic Study, they won't give you treasures from this either.
I got a lot to say about Tempting Contract, but let's
come back to it after I read Wanted Scoundrels. 1 and a black, human pirate, 4/3. When this dies, target opponent creates 2 colorless treasure tokens. Period. Yeah. I'm not going to read what a treasure does. We all know that. Mm-hmm. This was one of those like weird cards in Ixalan where you're like, oh, that's a huge creature for 2. Yeah, but if it dies, my opponent gets 2 mana, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, giving your opponent 2 mana is a lot. But that's 2 treasures. If Mazirek's out, they're going to sack those. You're going to get a lot of plus encounters. It's probably worth it.
So yeah, all of these cards have in common the idea that we're going to give our opponents treasures, and that is obviously not great, but we've got some ways to pay that off. But let's first look at these cards. Bucknard's Everfull Purse, 2 mana, pay 1, tap, roll a d4, get some treasures. So I have a feeling, and then you pass it off. I have a feeling that this card kind of depends on how well you roll that first d4. Like if you show your opponents that like, oh, I paid 1 and I got 4 treasures off of this thing, I think like, and it's like, okay, well now it's yours. Like you do whatever you want with it. I don't get anything else from it until you do. Until like it comes
3
around.
Other players do.
Obviously that's not the case because we care. This deck secretly cares about you guys having treasure, so I want you to have them. So I think this card is designed pretty nicely, right? Like yes, it's possibly pay 3 to get 1 treasure and then never see this again. That sucks. I would like this better if Bucknard's Everfull Purse cost 1. Consider, because then it could have been 1 and 1, and then maybe we break even, or maybe we get 4 or whatever. 2 is like, is this worth it? Anyways, but passing it around again, kind of meta dependent. But I think people are going to be like, okay, maybe I'll try this once. I'll see what happens. Worst case scenario is you break even, right? Tempting Contract is not even close to that. Tempting Contract's 4 mana at the beginning of your upkeep, so it doesn't even trigger until the next turn, and then everyone just decides whether or not this card does anything in your deck. Okay, so I've included this. I think this card is terrible. It's awful, but I put it in the deck because of what Sean said. It's meta dependent. Right? Sometimes you have those players who are like, I do not pay for Ristic Study, or
I do not pay for Ristic.
I always take the tempting, the tempt cycle, all those cards. I always take those, there's players who just don't care because it's fun and just do it. So, hey, if that happens, if you know players like that, especially, if you're willing to run a card like that, I think this is good. Also because it's very on theme. And this deck isn't some super high powerful deck that might people might this has an effect of like some people might just feel bad for you if you're losing that they'll give you treasures. I don't know, we'll see. But it is so bad though. Like Andy Zupke had this out in, I can't remember if it was on Commander Night Live or if it was on the Scrap Trawlers, but he had it out for 3 or 4 turns of the table and it never did anything. So you just had a 4-mana artifact there that just ate up a card in your deck. It's awful. We can dream up scenarios where people are nice and give this to you, but there's no scenario where if a player is like, there's no scenario where it makes sense to do this, right? Like, even if you're, I think even if you as an opponent,
it's your upkeep,
yeah,
right? Like your opponents don't even get first use of that. Like I could understand if it's like, well, I could win if I get this, but it's not my turn. Like I don't get the treasure on their upkeep, turn.
They can get it. I think the fix to this is to, and I can't believe they didn't think about it this way. Is Tempting Contract should always give you 1, right? 4 mana. You make a treasure at the beginning of your upkeep.
Well, that's what all the other tempting cards do.
Exactly. Yeah. Why would we break this? Why would we break the cycle and make this do anything else? And the reason why some people, I think, take the tempting cycles like offers is because they see you getting it and they're like, well, you get 1, I want 1. And then they don't, and then it's like, well, then but then he gets 2. And then you're like, then they're like, well,
the other player's like, well, I'm not going to be the only one left out of this.
But this one, it's way too easy for everyone to just be going, no, I'm just going to make you have a 4-mana, literally do nothing card in your deck.
Yeah, trade this in for that 0-mana artifact that does nothing.
I am not kidding. I want them to errata this card to say that we get 1.
Yeah,
I really do.
That's
never
how
thought
the
they should do
tempting
that.
cards work.
I've never thought they should do that. I truly believe they should do that for this card.
And would it be so bad? Like I mean, there's a million blue cards that give you an extra draw every turn. Like this effectively ramps you by an extra 1 every turn.
It's not even good. It's still not good. Like it's not, because it's still temporary mana, right? Yeah. It's not giving you a land every turn, and there's probably and there are cards that do that.
Yes.
So like think about it, like Awakening Zone.
Right.
It's a good card, but that's even better than this, right? Like that's a creature you're getting. Yeah. So anyways, we included it because it's very on theme, and because of at this part in the show, I wanted to talk about how we're going to give our opponents treasures, but it's a bad card, and I could go on for a long time about it. Anyways, so we're giving our opponents treasures as well. Tangent over, rant over. And here's where we're going to get. Here's where the inspiration came from. Viridian Revel, 1 green, an enchantment. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. Saw some people talking on Twitter about how this card is just generally good now because treasures are being run so much, and I think that that's true. I think that a 3-mana enchantment, you're going to draw at least a couple cards off of this, and that's very worth it. Even if you only drew 2, that's pretty worth it. You know what I mean? So, and you're going to. So the fact that we're going to give out some treasures and we have a card like this in our deck, that's great. But we also have a couple other ones like Kothafed, Soul Hoarder, 4 black for a 6/6 flying legendary demon. Whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose a life. Ooh. So, there's a little bit of a more danger there with old Kothafed, but that's still a deal you'll take most of the time there. And it is not a May, by the way. You have to do that every time. So you can get killed with this card, but I've played this card.
What a way to go.
I've played this card a bunch of times in a couple decks, and that's never happened. So you're good. Trust me. But just in case you think it's going to be a problem, Fangren Marauder is here. A 5 and a green for a 5/5 beast. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may gain 5 life. So Fangren helps out with that. 5 life.
That's a lot of life,
right? That's a lot.
Especially if you like this card was clearly printed. Well, it was from Mirrored and Besiege. It was clearly printed before treasures and gold and clues and food. It's like artifacts are going to the graveyard left LRC now.
I would argue that this is kind of like Viridian Revel. This is kind of just a really good card.
Like
5 life.
any graveyard is like, okay, I'm gonna sack 4 treasures, cast this spell, gain 20 life, pass to you.
It's unbelievable. It's a common. I mean, it's a 6-mana 5/5, but that's a big effect on the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's great. And there's another. I'm not going to highlight it, but there's another artifact that does the same thing, except it's 1 life per artifact for anyone's graveyard, and still that's still good.
I mean, it's still good, but compared to after I've seen 5, yes, I don't want
exactly.
one.
You're not talking about one.
Take one. I'm sending one back to the kitchen.
Okay, so let's speed through these last few here.
Okay,
these 2 are just fun entries that work well with treasures.
Yeah, Moulder Slug, 3 green, 4/6 beast. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact. Use it or lose it.
Exactly. Use it or lose it, but even if you try to use it, then you have to lose something else. So what they're going to do is probably keep their treasures around, not use them, or at least one of them, because Moulder Slug is going to take your mana rock otherwise. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorcerer's Broom, 2 generic for an artifact creature spirit, 2/1. Whenever you sack another permanent, you may pay 3. If you do, create a copy of Sorcerer's Broom.
I'm just happy I found another deck that Sorcerer's Broom makes any sense to go in.
Yeah.
We had it with Oswald Fiddlebender, and now we got one here, so I like Sorcerer's Broom. And then we also have Aetherworks Marvel, which is just an incredible card, 4 mana.
Yeah.
Whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get energy, and then you pay 6 energy and tap this, and you get a card from the top 6 of your library, basically.
I like it.
We love it. Powerful card, of course. And then finally, these are the payoffs. We got Aetherworks Marvel here. This is a really big payoff card, and it's kind of like the opposite of what we were doing at when we talked about tokens, because that's a real big theme that we could have gone with. But Ovia Pashiri, Sage Lifecrafter. It's a single green for 1/2. Human Artificer, legendary. Pay 2 and a green, tap, make a 1/1 servo. 4 and a green, tap, make an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is the number of creatures you control. So you can get a bunch of servos, and you can make these big constructs. And then similarly, we have Karn, the Planeswalker, Scion of Urza, 4 colorless for the 5 loyalty walker. +1, you reveal 2 cards, and you get 1. It's like card advantage, whatever. It's not important. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's the other half of that ability. Who cares? Here's what we care about. -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So
that gets big.
Karn gets really big. The Olivia things or Ovia Pashiri gets really big from the servos. Karn gets really big just from your treasures. So you do kind of have this like mini token theme, but it's not really, because it really cares about your treasures. Anyways, it's a lot of fun, and it all kind of works together at different points kind of along the curve. And all the while, nice. you're giving treasures to your opponents, and they're sacrificing things, and you guys are getting way bigger, and it's a fun deck.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
We don't have any red in here, and you know what? We don't need it. We're fine. Speaking of, we're all fine here. Out in Discord, is where a lot of these ideas came from. We went in there with just this theme, and then of course, if you're a patron of ours over at patreon.com/commandersbrew, you can jump in on our Discord and become a part of it. We've had some new patrons recently. And I'm excited for the new patrons to jump in the Discord and help out with the next brews. But for this one, we had help from some true classics: Dylan PH, Jason Belk, Eloy Dude, Brave Sir Robin, Chiefy, Nostrak 2, Beppo, and Beauregardin. If I missed anyone, apologies. I'll get you next time. But this was a Fast and Furious brew. It was like a tight group really coming together on this one. So I really appreciate the help, as always. Well, we've talked about the Discord helpers. We've finished breaking down the deck. Let's get into the budget report. Okay. I'm happy to report that this one is under $100. We got this one to be TCG market price or whatever it is, like 93. Mid is like around 90 something. So yeah, we're under 100 with this. The low was about 55. And you can definitely shave a few dollars off of that if you're looking to do that. Most expensive card in the deck, Sean, you mentioned it already.
Revel and Riches. Yeah. What is that? Like on
it's like $13, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's about $13, and it's tough because it is really good and it's an engine, but at the same time it's scary to your opponents, and they will just destroy it as soon as they can, basically. So
yeah,
I think you could cut it, but I would try to keep it in as much as I could. Second most expensive is Karn, Scion of Urza. It works really well. That -2, even if you can only get it off once or twice, is really sweet. But I think you can do without it. I think it's like we can find other ways to like have this kind of end game creature to help us, kill stuff. So I would say you can cut Karn. Karn's coming in at about how much is it there?
$7.
$7, yeah. And this is an interesting one. We didn't talk about this, but
treasure map.
Yeah,
I do love this artifact.
Me too.
It's a 2-mana artifact, 1 and a tap to scry 1, but you also put a landmark counter on it. And then when you get 3 landmark counters on it, you flip it over, and it becomes Treasure Cove. Taps for colorless, or tap, sack a treasure, draw a card. It allows your treasures to either be mana or cards, which is amazing. And it gives you 3 treasures right away when it flips as well.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it just ties up 1 of your mana for a couple of turns, but you will get paid back those 3 mana if you don't set right. Like it pays for itself over time, technically.
It's a great card.
It's just a tempo thing.
And it's the scry one is nice, right? It's
I'll take it.
It's good. It's a really good card. It's about what, like $6 or something like that.
Yeah, $6.50.
And there's not that many ways to make treasures in the deck, honestly. There's enough to make a deck, like I said, but if we start cutting them out, then we start losing one of the main things we're doing. So treasure map, same thing as Revel and Riches. I know it's kind of expensive, but I'd like to keep it. But if you were to cut one, I'd say cut Revel, because you're cutting like twice the price of this.
Yeah.
Treasure map can at least can help you draw cards and stuff as well. And then when it comes to pricey cards, we did not run. Well, the number one that just came right to my mind was Old Gnawbone, because we talked about this one in the Discord right away. But this is a $27 card. It's a 7-mana 7/7, but it's mythic. It's one of the things. 5 green legendary dragon with flying. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. Like
create that many.
Yeah,
like this turns one combat step into. It's weird, right? Like Craterhoof is the greatest example of a big creature that kind of wins the game, but like Old Gnawbone is just like, I mean, you're close to Craterhoof. Why not just like wait? Like, but now if you hit, you don't win the game, but now you have 50 mana. So
yeah.
So like, what are you like? It's weird. Like, I want a lot of mana, but I don't know if I don't always want 50 mana.
But it's nice if you just even got 2 or 3, right? Just being able just hitting and then getting a couple mana here and there. But like by the time you have 7, it can make a difference. And in this deck, it certainly does make a difference. I think if you have one of these, build this deck, because this would be one of the cruxes of the deck. It's so good. I thought about trying to like squeeze it in and try and still keep it around that $100, but you just end up having to cut too much stuff. So if you're looking to keep it under 100, but if you don't mind and you want to splurge, Old Gnawbone's an incredible card in this deck, and I would highly recommend it. Otherwise, any token doublers are great, obviously, and there's a lot of great sack outlets out there too. But that's it. That's what we're doing. That was the whole deck. It's a Mazirek, Kraul, Death Priest, Golgari treasures. You can do it. You can take an off-color theme and go and run with it and see what cards are out there to support it and have a lot of fun. And Mazirek and treasures works really well together. You can go deeper on any number of angles we've taken in this deck, including golems and Nich Tekic. And in fact, you can see all of that on Lost Cards, which will be out later this week. If you're seeing this when it comes out right away. Thank you all for watching this episode. We will be back, like I said, with Lost Cards in a bit, and next week with a brand new deck tech. We'll see you then. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCG Player affiliate link below.
That helps us out too. And for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.